What if your service dog training plan started with science? Welcome to The Dog Who Asked for More, the podcast helping dog parents who feel stuck and overwhelmed by their pup finally let go of the guilt, learn to communicate clearly, and build the bond you've always dreamed of through a partnership-based approach that combines training, nutrition, and enrichment instead of chasing the quick fixes that don't actually work. Species-specific communication and consent, not control. I'm Em. And in this episode, you'll learn how to build rock-solid service dog foundations using choice, reinforcement, and scent-based protocols. Species-specific communication prevents burnout for both the dog and handler. How to audit your training plan for clarity, welfare, and public access readiness, because creating a reliable service dog starts with trust, not tasks. Ashley, you've been in the behavior science field pretty deeply for the past 24 years. What drew you into behavior so early, and how did it evolve into service dog work?
I would say that what drew me into behavior had to be my earlier childhood interacting with dogs and the way that my family sort of introduced me to dogs. We had a family dog that I called him Uncle Sam, actually. He was an English Cocker Spaniel, and he was owned by my Uncle Lee. And one of the things I was always taught was about the things that the dog liked, about things that the dog disliked. I was never approached or told about a dog as if it weren't meant to have feelings of its own. So when I got my first dog, my first personal dog, I was about 7 years old. I got him as a birthday present, actually, because I'd been asking for a dog. And he had food-related guarding and aggressive behavior. He would snap at you or lightly bite you if you were going to go reach for his food, or touch him if he were eating. Because I was told, okay, these are some things that dogs might do to express themselves, I wasn't tied to this being a problem with my dog. I was just like, well, how do I make this work with me and him? Especially when we had moved him into the house, because he was an outside dog at first. My family's from Jamaica. We were used to dogs being outside animals, not inside. And of course, me being an Americanized woman, I was like, no, I'm moving this dog inside. At a certain age, I did move him into the house, and he was crate trained. And I came up with a method so that I was never touching his food in his presence or while he was eating. And he wasn't near me or feeling threatened by me being present around his food, which was I would open the crate and tell him to go target a mat and sit on it. And I would fix up his food, put his food in the kennel. And then I would tell him, okay, he can go get it. And I would close the kennel. There was no force used there. So I never really saw a need to use any type of punishment. This was just me trying to find a way to sort of cohabitate with my dog. And from there, it got me to learning about dogs and learning about their behavior, why they would exhibit certain behaviors. And I always used to focus on their expression. Yes, they growl, they do this, they have hard stares, body stiffening, but what can all of this mean to the individual dog? And I got into that, and I started working with dogs that were fearful or had reactivity issues through a training company. And then from there, through that same training company, was able to branch out into service animals. And that's what led me into service animals, because I got to do some work alongside an organization that's local to Florida, that the training company that I worked with, it was an in-prison program where you get to work with the inmates. So yeah, that was really exciting and fun. And it also allowed me to sort of branch out my skills, but also recognize like, oh, okay, service dogs have multiple facets. They can be for any type of work, which that led me to training my own service dog at the same time, because I realized, okay, so I don't have to sit here and endure panic and anxiety and all these other things that are actually debilitating in my day. The service dogs are relevant for these things as well. And that's kind of what led me from behavior science into service work. Trying to make that a short story.
I love how it was curiosity driven. I'm a big learner. It's because I ask questions, because I have a problem and I figure out how to solve it. So I love finding other people that learn for the same reasons that I do and test things out a little bit. I love that your curiosity took you across so many different fields, and how you just took your skill set and morphed it into what you needed at the moment. That's just very inspiring, first of all. And second of all, it just shows you how much a little bit of questioning the norm can actually make a change and a ripple effect and change the circumstances for whoever is involved in the situation. So I think it's really cool that you took the time and spread out your knowledge across multiple different areas, because that's kind of where most people get stuck. Understand why we need to have specialties and why we need to have specialized trainers. And there are certain areas in which we need to be hyper focused on things. There's certain types of service dogs for sure that need to be really hyper focused on and brought into more niche training. But for the most part, tasking skills are pretty general and pretty even keeled. And unless you're teaching them to alert to maybe something that's scent specific, you really can play around with it at first. So I like that you used your ability to think in different scenarios and apply it to different circumstances so that you could build something that was a little bit different and a little bit more widely accessible for your clients. It's very cool.
I had fun creating my program, but yes, also learning the way that I did. It was not conventional in any sense of the word. I was someone who was also at the time battling the struggles that come with certain developmental disabilities because I'm also dyslexic. So reading, there was not gaining a lot of content through reading. I gained a lot of content through visual media and through audio. And sometimes, yes, I would get books, but even then, I could only read maybe short paragraphs to get snippets of information. Because general coursework surrounding this kind of stuff is reading, it's usually a lot of reading. There's a lot of literature. People have often asked me, well, what books have you read? And I'm just like, no, I learned everything I learned through inference, through information, and through observation because that was what I could use. So that also lent to my compassion towards the dogs I was working with. That was highlighted to me just from working with other animals. So I did work with wildlife, as you did briefly mention. And while working with wildlife, I had one person that I was just chatting with casually who also volunteered at the same facility, talking about a baby gator that he had. And I remember at that time a little spooked by gators. Not that I hated him, not that I disliked him. I was just a little spooked by him. And I'm not even a religious person. He said this very simply. And he was just like, well, that's how he eats. That's the way God made him. And I said, and now I have to be a little less critical because it isn't his fault that he operates the way he does, that's how he's capable of surviving. So it made me think of that even further with dogs. So it's not even like all of the strict educational information. It's just nuggets of truth sometimes that people that I'm working with are also dropping along the way because yeah, a dog is really just operating with what it has. I learned operating with what I have, despite the fact that everybody was trying to tell me, no, but you need to read this to do it. I got here without reading as much as everybody else did. So it lent to that compassion when working with the dogs too.
That's how he is. You could apply that to pretty much anything in life. If you really sit down and take the time to think, oh, this dog is made this way, this dog is made that way, this cat is made this way, the gator is made this way. Like they're going to do the things that are appropriate to their species and they're going to function and have thoughts and do certain things maybe behaviorally that we don't understand because we're not gators or dogs or cats.
We're
What
not
a
gators. Dogs.
we're not, it just what a simple statement that is such a huge eye-opening moment for you and now probably many other people, including me, because we have to look at what is happening in this situation with this specific creature and why is it happening? Well, a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's just how they're made.
That's just how they're
What a
made. Yeah.
just a simple statement. Just boom. I
Like,
have to think on that one and get back to you.
right. And you're talking about me as a teenager. I'm here already loving the wildlife. And he's just like, all right, let me see what you do with that.
My learning in the dog world, it started out with pet sitting when I was about 12 years old. And then I moved into vet tech life. And then I went back to pet sitting and dog walking. And now here I am training dogs. But a lot of that is taking all of these little tiny moments because, like you, I didn't even think to read. I read for enjoyment. So thinking about reading as a way to learn in this area was not that was textbook. When I was in vet tech school, there was so much reading. And a lot of those textbooks are boring. I'm not going to lie about it. They are boring and you have to memorize things and then you have to spit them back out and check off your multiple choice test and all that stuff. It's a lot of eat, process, repeat. It's the same thing for your brain. And I love to learn, but I also like to learn in a way that it is more hands-on and visual like you. I just learn better that way. Show me how to do something and I will do it that way forever and ever and ever and ever. If someone had tried to teach me how to put an IV catheter in through a book, there's no way. There's no way because you have to be able to feel where the vein is. You have to know exactly what it feels like when you punch that needle through the skin. And then you have to know exactly how to level it out so you don't push it through the other side of the vein and
Right.
rupture everything. Like it's very tactile. You have to have a feeling for it. You have to be able to touch it and understand how those parts of the body work. Because otherwise, you're just going to fuck it up. In a story, you're just going to mess it up and it's going to be a whole thing. And then you're going to have to switch to a different arm or you're going to have to hand it off to a different tech. And you have to get good and you have to get fast at those things. And there are some things that you just can't learn without hands on experience. You can read about it all day and all night and not understand it. Somebody said something to me in another podcast episode where knowledge and wisdom are different. And the difference between knowledge and wisdom is like understanding. You can have knowledge of something, but not understand it. And knowledge is knowing something, but wisdom is understanding that knowledge. And
Yeah.
so I think that that's what you're cultivating over there is your own wisdom, which is beautiful.
So knowledge for me, because that knowledge and wisdom thing is a big one for me. I went through school. I was never the person who sat there and said, this particular subject I'm in isn't important. Un- like there was nothing about me that used to annoying, maybe. Boring the way the teacher was doing it, maybe. But unimportant? Oh. So I wanted to be invested, but sometimes it was like, gosh, how do you expect me to sit through this? Within that, I took a lot of different classes. And one of the classes I took was the philosophy. I took a philosophy course because I was going to be interested in that. I'm in a relationship with someone who graduated with a degree in philosophy on top of it. So I like philosophical conversation. And one of the biggest things for me was I call it the I'm smart paradox. And it's a paradox that is only true. It is a paradox because in recognizing that it is true, you make it true. So I say, okay, I'm the smartest person, right? But to be the smartest person, I have to realize how stupid I am because I have to remember how much I do not know. I have to remember how much I don't know. There are things that I do not have information on yet because most of the information that I've gotten is stuff that other people found out. And I'm taking that information and then I'm using it to see the world around me and see either how that information has changed or how that information might not be true. Right. So if I am continually telling myself that I know nothing, then I'm always seeking information to know something upon. Therefore, yes, I am the smartest one in the room because I don't think I'm the smartest one in the room. It is, it is something that in essence builds upon itself. But then when you're separating the knowledge and the wisdom, it's the same thing when I tell people to not measure intelligence based on how human something looks or how human something is operating. What is the information that it has? And now what is it doing with it? What is the information that the thing now has, however it gathered it? And now what is it doing with that information? Observing that to me is observing the creature's intelligence, not whether or not it can do it like me. What did it do with it at all?
It's where so many people get lost when it comes to canine intelligence. Because honestly, in my opinion, I think dogs are probably way smarter and way more intuitive than we are as human beings. They can smell better, they can hear better, and they are 100% better observers because they can inference things so quickly from our behavior without speaking a single word to us. But as humans, we judge intelligence exactly the way that you just said, by how much something can mimic, repeat, or process something the way that we do. Dogs don't do that because they're really good at being dogs, and their intelligence level is probably much more vast and much more deep than we actually think it is, because we're too busy comparing them to what they can do for us, how they do what we ask them to do, and how well they're responding to whatever situation we put them in.
Yeah.
Not because they're dumb or they don't understand human societal norms. And
Right.
God, most of the time, I don't understand human societal norms.
True.
So how can we ask another species to do that?
Yeah, that was one of the key points I was trying to make in an anthropomorphisms webinar, actually, that I just did for Every Dog Austin. And they're this free, force-free, digital force-free source. I believe they also have a space in Austin, but it was a webinar about anthropomorphism because everyone will say things like, that's anthropomorphizing, or this. It's almost become a buzzword, in my opinion, because a lot of people are using it without understanding what it would actually mean to anthropomorphize something because of how many things they consider to be strictly human characteristics. And they're not strictly human characteristics. There's a lot of characteristics like parenting that's a mammalian characteristic. That is not a human characteristic to parent your young. It is a mammalian characteristic to parent your young. So just the fact that you think a puppy should be responding to you like an adult dog is already a misrepresentation of a puppy. It's already a misrepresentation because a puppy would still be getting parented by its mother right now. Just because her parenting style looks different than yours because she's parenting it like a dog, because she's preparing it for life as a dog, not for life with humans. She's preparing it for life as a dog because that's what a dog knows how to be, a dog. So you are getting the dog and are saying, I need to prepare this being for life with me, but I expect it to also already know all of this other stuff. Why? Why?
I have a perfect example of this. I was driving home from the next town over the other day, and I was at a stoplight, and this woman comes walking across the crosswalk with probably a puppy that was maybe 8 to 10 weeks old. It was very young. It was on a leash, and she was just dragging it across the crosswalk. I'm sorry, taking a 8 to 10-week-old puppy for a walk? Clearly like a distance walk, because let me tell you, the closest apartment building was probably half a mile that way, and she was going this way. An 8 to 10-week-old puppy does not know how to walk on a leash, does not know how to pay attention to what's going on, doesn't know anything about cars or buses or traffic lights or any of that stuff. They're still so brand new. If you compare that to, let's take a brand new newborn 8 to 10-week-old baby and drag it across a parking lot on
Right.
a leash,
Right.
like, what the heck, guys? Seriously.
You can
8
just
10 week
expect
old
it to
baby can't walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The amount of expectation we have because it's a creature that can walk. So it must be able to walk on a leash. So it must be able to go for a long walk. So it must know this, that, and the other thing
I can
because
tell
it can
you, you just
move.
figured out how to use those limbs 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody who's seen a brand new puppy walking around, if you've ever seen a deer or a horse or even like a giraffe come out of the womb and they're all like, I mean, puppies do that until they're about 4 months old. They don't know what they're doing half the time. And I think that it's just crazy that we have such high expectations for something that is literally a baby.
Yeah.
Literally a baby. It's
I
wild.
try to explain to people who have a toddler. And this is the thing that I emphasized the most when I was doing service work too, because I understand us who have disabilities. There is this rush. There is this high. There is this, oh my God, I'm getting something to help me and it can also be my friend. But we also put this overwhelming amount of pressure on this animal as if we didn't have some form of mitigation for our disability long before we got this animal. As if we don't recognize that there is no way for this animal to reach the point of being our, as I call them in my company, healthcare companion, if we are not the teachers and the mentors to getting them to that place first. How are you not going to mentor this young puppy into being the service dog that is literally what you signed up for if you signed up to be a handler trainer? It is what you signed up for. And yes, I'm not going to say all of those things do not come with frustrations. I'm not going to say that all of those things do not come with their ups and downs and oscillations, and you're going to need a support system, which is something that might be hard for a lot of disabled individuals. We're not trying to say that. We're trying to say that the reality of the situation is that this life that you took on to be a companion needs a companion and a mentor first. And you can't sit there and expect a toddler to be your service animal, your healthcare companion, when I do mean just 2 weeks earlier, he was figuring out how to waddle into the grass to pee. You can't put that level of expectation. That is asking a 4-year-old to be your doctor. He might enjoy the stethoscope. He might use it to take a look at your heart and listen to it and think that's all cool. And he might be inspired to one day make this his career. You will ruin it if you pressure him into doing it every single day like it's his job.
Yeah. I love that you use mentor and handler together like that, because it is true. You have to guide the dog. And even if your dog isn't a service dog, let's talk about that for a second, because even if your dog isn't a service dog, you still have to be a mentor to your dog. You have to teach your dog how to exist in your house. And eventually they're going to get better at it. But even when they're 14, 17, 20 years old, they still need a little bit of guidance. I'm sure some of you guys have heard Fitz barking in the background of this podcast episode. Today, he's a little sensitive. Today, he's a little barky. And I'm not going to correct him for having some feelings about how the day is going, because he's allowed to have those days where he's like, maybe I just feel like I need to bark at every little noise that I hear today, because he's having some anxiety, because he's feeling unsure today. Maybe he didn't sleep well last night. I wish more people would look at their dogs like that and think, today might be a good day for me to stay home because my mental health is unstable. My dog might not be up to the task today because I can tell that they're feeling a little bit more sensitive. And maybe it would just be a bad combination for us to leave the house together. Or maybe my dog is having a bad mental health day, so I think I can handle the 2 errands that I need to run by myself. I think that it is so important that we monitor our own levels of where we are at mentally, physically, emotionally, but also look at our dogs and do the same thing and make smart decisions for both of us. And I think that there are so many people that don't do that. And then that's where we put our dogs into situations where it's not good for them. And now we've had this dog be a service dog for 4 years. Something really scary and terrifying happens. And that one incident that we could have changed by letting the dog stay home or not leaving the house that day has now washed that service dog.
Yeah, you change the entire, the entire career path and the entire circumstance of your reality as well. Like, the awareness of our impact due to the fast-paced environment that has been, in essence, engineered around us, our awareness of our impact has decreased a lot. And I feel like that's something that we need to gain back, not just for the sake of the animals, but for the sake of our own selves, realistically, because the lack of awareness has also led to the point where we ourselves don't have the time to invest. Our own lack of awareness has led to this socioeconomic landscape where we're spending at least 12 hours of our time and energy on our 9 to 5. Usually benefits that we're receiving aren't such that we can even take advantage of them sometimes. I know a lot of people working 9 to 5 jobs that maybe they need to go to a doctor, but they can't make it to a doctor because even though they have health insurance, they can't get time off to go to the doctor. So we're asking people in this world that's been engineered around them with jobs that last more than 40 hours a week, right? Like, there's people who work 60, 80 hours to take the time to think, to remember that they're with another living thing. Because 9 times out of 10, I'm not seeing it's that people don't know. I'm seeing it's that, when does this get to cross my mind? Like, I'm seeing that on people's faces. Like, how is that supposed to be crossing my mind right now? And I mean, feels, I get it. I get it. but then have the awareness of that to also collectively try to change those things within your community. It's happening because you're absent and someone else is making the decisions for your life, my friend. If you know that we are a country of dog lovers, we want to continue to have dogs as a part of our lives, then our lives need to be engineered to be able to have dogs in them, children in them. Again, let's not even include it as the dogs right now. There's so many people who want to talk about having families and having children. Children require a time investment. They require guidance. They require mentorship in order to facilitate these things where you have the time, where you have the commodity of time, because we've created it and turned it into a commodity now. When you have the commodity of time to invest, you have to, or in essence, construct that world because you weren't paying attention when it was basically robbing you of the hours that you technically need.
Let's talk about the time investment that comes with a service dog. I think that that's something that's super important. I don't think that it's something that's talked about a lot. But before we get real deep into that, I want to talk about first how we find a service dog that is fit for service dog training, because temperament, motivation, environment, all of those things that we have to evaluate before we start task training and all of that kind of stuff are super important. I've heard way too many times on social media, any dog can be a service dog. I believe that this statement is false. I believe that it is false. I believe that it takes a certain type of dog to be a service dog. I believe that resilience is a really important thing, that a dog has to be very adaptable and has to be pretty chill in pretty much any situation, any environment, but also has to be easily motivated and just kind of happy to be there, right? Happy to be there and willing to perform their jobs. And that is not every dog. That guy right there, he is not the dog. So I would like for you to kind of expand on that and talk about what you look for in a dog that you're training to be a companion that makes it easier for people to mentor that dog, and then talk about how much time it takes to really level that dog up.
First, I'm going to piggyback off of your statement because it's saying that every dog can be a service dog is flawed in the same logic as saying every human can be a business owner. Every human cannot be a business owner, and it is not an insult if your specific dog cannot be or was not designed for service. That is not an insult. That's not a mark against your dog. So first and foremost, I think it's important to get that sort of stigma and notion out of your head, especially since it is a specific characteristic. Just like you wouldn't want somebody who was meant to be a mechanic or Canadian logger to be your surgeon. Like, don't try to shove a square peg into a round hole. That's just it's not good practices in either direction. But what I usually look for, yes, is a dog who both has independence but self-confidence. A dog who is self-assured is usually what I'm looking for. So that is a dog who independently, if he does something or is in control of something and it happens, he's like, oh, okay, like whatever. You also want a dog that tends to adapt to circumstances easily. And what I mean by that is their startle recovery. How quickly do they startle, or do they startle? Right? Is their startle even noticeable? Because there's some times where, like, yeah, that might have caught their attention, but it didn't freak them out. So you want a dog that is highly adaptable, that is able to process and move through events quickly, not really have to sit there and think about it for too long because they're unsure. So that is a really good feature. And I find that that trait just sort of goes along with that internal self-confidence. A dog that is usually independent, has some internal self-confidence, but likes to be around people. I don't say that they're overly excited by people or just likes the company of other individuals. I do tend to lean towards that. There's some people who tend to like aloofness more, but you have to be, in my opinion, you have to be careful with aloofness, because aloofness can also turn into defensive. And this is me just talking about personality traits. So despite all of these award-winning personality traits, being self-confident, being independent, wanting to go off and do your own thing, but responsive and wanting to be around people, all of these character traits still don't mean that the dog is going to make it to being a service dog at the end, right? Which is where the time investment part comes in. Time investment is both a lot and a little. Because the part that's a lot is how many times you're going to be repeating and doing some of the same exercises and the same things and going out to the same places and having them go see the same stuff is going to be a lot. And with a puppy, you're probably out there for about 2 or 3 minutes at a time. They're not super long exposure sessions, but they are frequent exposure sessions. The minute you've brought this puppy home, it is a little bit of decompression and then a time investment. And you're talking about the minimum of 2 years invested just to get that dog to be considered, in quotations, fully trained service animal. Because there are some dogs that might take longer, just like there's some kids that take longer to leave school. There are some dogs that might have run into a hiccup. There are some handlers that might have had to slow down their training because of their disability. And therefore, they don't meet that 2-year mark. Maybe they go a little further. There's some dogs that mature a little later and their handlers are trying to be safe. It's a long process. Individuals who are freaking out over their 6-month-old puppy not looking like a service dog, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. You're telling me that your teenager doesn't look like he's going to make it to college. I know. It happens. We work through those times and we send in the acceptance letters when he passes with straight C's from senior year. And then he goes to college and he makes freaking cum laude. Sometimes that's the way it happens. But your 6-month-old dog isn't even at the halfway point. Like realistically, your 6-month-old isn't even at the halfway point. Trying to say he doesn't look like a service dog and he's 6 months old, 7 months old, 8 months old. If we're talking about the timeline we said it was going to take, which is 2 years, 1 year is the halfway point. Your teenage puppy, yes, needs time investment, but they need a lot of support in that time investment. They don't need a drill sergeant. In my opinion, that's the first way to kill your teenage dog into becoming the service dog you want them to be, is become their drill sergeant because you think they're goofing off too much.
Okay, so tell me about your non-negotiable foundations in the beginning here before you start adding in the task training. People start worrying about the tasks right away and they don't worry about the relationship. They don't worry about the foundations. They're like, oh, my dog needs to be able to bring me my medication. Oh, my dog needs to be able to alert me. I need to do all of these things, but they don't focus on those foundations. Can the dog pay attention? Can the dog stay over here? Can the dog neutrally watch this person pass by? Handling, all the kinds of things before we worry about, can we make this dog a service dog?
Okay, so within the timeline, 0 or 2 months when they get to me to about a year old, yes, we're doing outings, but it's mainly for exposure. It's mainly to maintain confidence. It's mainly to kind of say, this is an active part of your lifestyle. So this is something you still need to be comfortable with. So going on outings isn't even so much about expecting them to perform on these trips. It's about making sure that they're still okay with these environments and able to refocus their attention in these environments on these trips. Why? Because there's way more chaos going on here than when we were inside the house working on some of these behaviors. So when I'm taking you out, if you start showing me that you can respond with a sit if I ask for it, not just offer me a sit, then sure, maybe I'll practice these things from time to time. But I'm not here trying to ask my dog to give me a performance at the age range where trying to adjust to these circumstances is already hard. Trying to adjust to all the clanging noises, and they become more difficult as the dog ages. There are people who like to argue about the fact that, if you expose your puppy to all of this when they're puppies within that socialization window, you'll be fine. No, because just like children, you can expose your kids to all of these things, and then all of a sudden they'll go through puberty, and one of those things you expose them to turns into the scariest thing ever. Or all of a sudden they don't like that food anymore. There's changes that happen within adolescence that you still need to be there for, be aware of, support your dog through. So to sit there and try to tell yourself, this is the moment where I'm supposed to be drilling my dog on all of the behaviors that they can perform in this environment. No, this is where you're still double checking to make sure your dog can actually be legit in this environment. And then we're still working on all the foundations are games. If it's a dog that needs to be imprinted on scent, we're playing scent games. I'm not asking you to alert to me in a mall when you're 5 months old. We're playing scent games. If you alert to me in a mall when you're 5 months old, I'm giving you a steak because that was not your job yet. You're learning to do this. You got the answer right, you get a steak. Dogs sometimes will showcase, just like children will, aptitude for things. And again, as human beings, we get excited, just like parents do when they see kids that have aptitude for things. They're like, oh my God. Put them in all the piano lessons, put them in all the music classes, put them in all that. Did you ask the kid first? Because maybe the way that they continue to be a musical genius is just by being them. So a lot of the times when I see a dog, if I'm working with a dog with aptitude, we are just building on that foundation. We are just doing all the games to make them keep that attitude. We are just doing everything to make sure that nothing is going to really catch them off guard in a bad way in the future. We can get to the college level coursework when they're at a college level brain capacity. That's kind of the long and short.
That's really important, though, because again, humans, we grow and we learn at different rates, in different environments, at different paces, with different surroundings, all the things. Something that we skip a lot as humans when we're looking at our dogs again is this dog takes this long to do this. This dog takes this long to do. Well, humans are the same way. This human takes this long. This human takes this long. This human takes this long. So we need to give our dogs a little bit of grace in that area. And we need to say, okay, this isn't sticking. Maybe we take a break from this for a day or two. Maybe we switch to this next week, things like that. And understand it's not a failure. Sometimes that click just takes a little bit differently because of who the dog is. And people too quickly get frustrated by the fact that their dog is not doing the thing because, again, human construct. This is something that we have invented in our heads, in our society, and we're trying to apply it to a mass number of a different species. And yet we're not giving them any grace, only expectation. And so I like that you slow it down and you try to find different ways to figure out how to make it work for that dog. If a dog is struggling and you have tried 3, 4, 5 different ways and you're maxed out on ideas, is that where you call it? Do you reach out for help? How do you determine what your next is when you're stuck on something with a dog?
I would say it depends on what we're stuck on. For instance, if I see that it is something that changed within the dog that is now expressing itself, that was probably there as part of their personality as a puppy, not as pronounced. And I can tell that this is a factor that is not actually going to improve the situation for the dog or for a future handler, then I'll career change the dog. That is the best choice for the dog and the handler. The handler should get a dog that is, up to the task and willing, and the dog should be doing something that they enjoy. If it's something that's like technical, like, he kind of drops the retrieve before he gets to me. We talk to somebody else who works on retrieves. And there's probably something that I'm not seeing because I'm not the all-seeing eye. That's also another thing. There could be something inherently about the way that you train that isn't something that you're even aware of, that somebody else watching you could pick up on and be like, it's this, just fix it. And you have a resolved situation. So where I call it is dependent on whether or not I see this as a technical issue that can be easily resolved or a facet of the dog that is settling into its personality.
Tell me your non-negotiables for passing a dog as a service dog.
I won't pass a dog that's not comfortable in public. I don't care if that is, I'm not comfortable in a way where they are potentially reactive in a public space. I would not say I even drag a dog into that. Like, I don't even drag a dog to that point. If you look like you might become reactive in a space, I'm calling it on you. If it's a dog who has like iffy arousal predictability, so dogs that are sometimes like, they're cool. All of a sudden they have this random moment of just intense arousal. Yeah. And they display it and they just explode everywhere. That is a non-negotiable for me. I don't mean it in the sense of a dog that just gives like a little happy I'm talking about a dog that's going to like randomly bounce at somebody to lunge or whatever. And it doesn't have to be in an aggressive way. It's just in a way that's not going to work out. I do want to pay attention all the time to the handler's experience that's being created. And I am more particular about dogs I'm giving to other handlers than necessarily dogs I will train for myself. Because there are certain things I know that I'm capable of in terms of working with a dog versus handlers who are disabled who I'm giving dogs to. Me and my 24 years of experience can do things with a dog that's like having a slight nervous issue over here that somebody who's a green handler, maybe they've had one prior service dog, will be able to actually work through. And so for me, when you're giving a dog to somebody else, that dog should not be unstable in public areas. Absolute no. And the dog, should not have any random bouts of fear or arousal activity. Dogs that bark, I feel like those are dogs that sometimes you have to find out why they're barking, because sometimes there's dogs that bark out of excitement and it's just like, well, if he's excited to do the job, maybe there's a way to circumvent this. But it's usually dogs who are not stabilized and who are not enjoying themselves. If this dog is not going to enjoy themselves or be a liability for the handler, it's a no-go.
All of those are really important. And something that I know about you that maybe not everybody knows about you is that you're really big on sniffing, which is awesome because I think a lot of other trainers or people in general think that maybe sniffing is off task. But you actually teach sniffing protocols to help improve performance and focus. So, talk a little bit about how you use intentional sniff work in service dog work.
There's a multitude of ways. So I do sniffing for a lot of decompression work before going into new spaces. Dogs are highly olfactory creatures. It's in my anthropomorphism seminar too, but like highly olfactory creatures, it's not funny how strong a dog's nose is and how much of their brain is dedicated to processing scent information. Allowing a dog sniffing time, sniffing ability, sniff, sniff, snuff, snuff in a lot of places is actually more public access training for the dog than anybody realizes because they are familiarizing themselves when you allow them to sniff. They are doing way more familiarization than they're doing with any other friggin' sense that they have. Like your dog can create an entire picture of the world through its sense of smell. So I do a lot of games where I will do fast sniffing games, right? Like tossing the treat. I will do games where I walk alongside the building and just let them sniff. I allow them to disengage and sniff when they are working on getting used to the environment. They are allowed to disengage from me, see something, disengage, sniff, see something, disengage, sniff. I want them to know how to self-regulate. And sniffing is also a self-regulating behavior for dogs. People think of sniffing as like this offensive thing. And I'm not going to say that in certain situations, I don't try to curtail the sniffing because in certain public spaces, yes, it might be like you cannot let your dog sniff a watermelon at the grocery store. There's rules, but you can give your dog the opportunity in a controlled setting to know what a watermelon smells like, so that it is not novel. You can create controlled experiences in a lot of ways in your own home using scent. When I'm working with a service dog intended litter, because I do breed border collies as well. When I'm working with an intended litter and my litter is inside, I go outside to a bunch of random locations and I'll pick up rocks from that place because that is one of the first senses they have as puppies, primarily. They're sniffer. So I'm taking scent from everywhere. You're going to get used to the smell of this random construction yard that's right by this place you're going to visit every day. It is not just a factor of imprinting. It is also a factor of exposing them to their environment before they even have to touch it with the thing that they use to gather the most information about it. So yeah. Me and the sniffer are big sniffing protocol.
Yeah, I love it because I have learned so much about the olfactory in dogs and how much better their scent smelling is than ours, 10,000 to upwards of 1,000,000 times better, depending on what it is and all of that kind of stuff. It's really very fascinating. And it's something that I would love to get into really, really deeply on one of these podcast episodes because it is so fascinating. And we are just scratching the surface of understanding how it works for dogs. But the simplest thing that started me on this was when Fitz started doing the chatter. I always thought it was so funny that he did that chatter. I was like, what? Why is his teeth chattering? And some people are like, he's nervous. Oh, he's whatever. No, he's processing the scent. He's making the air move faster through his system so that he can think about it and understand it better. It's so cool.
Yes, because when I wrote up the initial script for this seminar, I emphasized the Jacobson's organ so hard because we don't have one. And I was just like weak. Like, I was like, I guess evolution missed us on that. Not so special.
That's another area where humans, we think about intelligence. We don't understand the level of intelligence and brain work that is happening right there because we don't experience it. It's not something that we understand. So again, like I said earlier, I think dogs are smarter than us in so many ways because that's something that we'll never understand. We don't get it. Maybe down the road, somewhere of evolution will give it to us, but I don't think so. Humans don't use their nose for most things.
They were smart enough to recognize that working with us was meant to enhance their living capabilities. They realized we have a skill set based on how we're designed. They do. They know this. Okay. It is hilarious to me when I throw a ball, it lands in a tree because dogs do understand gravity. What goes up is meant to come down. And if it didn't do that, it's stuck. Okay. So here's my dog who will look up in the tree, right? And be like, yeah, it's up there. And then look at me like, excuse me, bipedal with fingers, get your ass over here because I need you to get this ball out of this tree. You're the one who can do this. Let's go. Wolves have done it with other creatures. Wolves will now work with raven. Interspecies relationships happen so much more easily with a lot of other species and not humans. And it's not because we're smarter. I'll put that one to bed. It's because we don't listen.
We don't listen. We don't listen to ourselves. We don't listen to each other. We definitely don't listen to our dogs. The world would be, I would say, a marginally better place if we would slow down and listen to each other.
Because it's a cooperative effort. I understand everybody went into this hyper individualism phase, screw capitalism. And like we all just started trudging forward and saying, hey, yeah, this is the and if you're back there, you're behind. I know Aesop has the fable about the tortoise and the hare. Sometimes you're running so fast, you're missing the whole point. Okay. Sometimes you do need to slow down because I've seen dogs try to communicate with their people. Another eye-opening experience for me was my dog, Abby, who was another just iconic experience in my youth. I got her when I was 15 years old. My dog, Abby, one time just trying to tell me that she needed water, going through the gauntlet to explain that she needed creature can't speak English, going through the gauntlet. And I just remember going to people after this in some of my classes and saying, if you think you're frustrated trying to get them to do something, how frustrated do you think they are trying to tell you what the hell they want? And you're just over here in goddamn La La Land. Like they're not doing anything.
On that note, tell people what red flags to look for in their service dog when they need to take a break, when they need to do a different task. Maybe this is their red flag that it's time for a career change. Tell people what they should be looking for. What are those signs?
I would say a sign that you probably need to double back and do some training, like say maybe do a refresher, is seeing any sort of agitation or anxiety in public spaces when you go back. I would say that even in the home, if you notice any difference in their physical behavior, take a step back, because I think sometimes people forget as dogs age, your dog could be going blind. Your dog could be going deaf. Your dog could be developing arthritis. Your dog could have a freaking toothache, and there's something loud when you're out and about, and both of those things make him uncomfortable or scared. Now, any signs of discomfort, agitation, fear in spaces that you never noticed before, I would say that that is the time to either take a step back and either do a vet check or training, depending on the age of the dog. However, either is appropriate regardless of the age of the dog, because you could have a 6-month-old dog that ends up with a degenerative joint issue that you did not expect. And that can happen. And simply because the dog is 6 months old does not mean that that isn't something that you should be paying attention to.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And how should a handler advocate for their dog in a busy environment?
I usually will practice a lot of cues to keep my dog out of the way in busy environments. So teaching my dog to go to the middle of me, teaching my dog to come in front of me and walk at a certain pace in front of me, teaching my dog to stay out of the way. But the way I would do it for people who are invasive is I usually will be very forward myself. Excuse me, even if it's just an excuse me, or putting my hand out, because I know some people don't like to talk. I just put on the autistic RBF face on and I'm like, no. Do you see this bubble I created for myself? It's my bubble. Me and this furry thing. Go away. I also try to make sure I have an eye on their tail. I can't tell you out of the 2 times that Rogue's tail got stepped on. If you're not a person with a dog with no tail, keep an eye on the tail at all times. That is their spine. Someone stepping on that is very painful. Your dog will have a reaction, and we cannot blame them if they do. So keep an eye on the tail.
Yeah, that's a big one. I don't think that people realize how important the tail is. I've known several people now who've had to wash a veteran service dog because the tail got stepped on, shut in a door, ripped around by a little kid, run over by a wheelchair, all kinds of things, because people don't pay attention to dogs unless they have a reason to. And it causes injuries and fear that results from the injuries.
Yeah. So Rogue had the instance of, we were at Medieval Times. Medieval Times is a very crowded place. And we were standing. I was wondering why she got frantic all of a sudden. Someone was standing on her tail and I'd be like, get off her tail. And then I moved her in front of me, sit her in front of me. And then that was it. I was one time at a restaurant where they walked by and she felt it and moved out of the way. And I saw her tail hairs had caught under the person's foot lying on the floor. And then the third time I was with a friend, and that time she went nuts because the guy was tall and heavy set. And she was like, ah. And I was just like, you're on her tail. And I was like, get off my dog's tail. Yeah. Watch out for the tail. I usually try to keep my dog in front of me or sweep their tail. But yes, the tail can get lost. Watch the tail.
That's a really good piece of advice. What do you wish more people understood about ethical service dog training versus quick fixes like e-collars, compulsion, or flooding?
Ethical service dog training when you're raising them from puppyhood might feel longer because you don't have a pristine looking dog at 6 months. However, in the long run, I would say, yeah, more positive for you. I would say in the long run, you get more longevity. In the long run, you get dogs that are much, 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 much more just settled into the fact that this is their lifestyle rather than this is something that I have to do every day. There is a difference, and I do see it in the dogs. Dogs that are just like, this is my job, and I've known how to do it for a while now, and I finally get to do the big boy stuff. And a dog that's like, I hate this. They drag me out here every single day. And they tell me it's supposed to be fun, but I hate it. I've seen those dogs too. And it's not worth it to try to use compulsion for a dog whose livelihood is centered around being someone that you need to rely on for your health. You don't want to force that.
100% agree with that statement. You do not want to force that. This dog is supposed to tell you when your heartbeat is off, when your blood sugar is up, when you're about to have a seizure, you're about to have a migraine, all kinds of different things that, again, our dogs and their nose intelligence can detect that we don't even necessarily feel in our own bodies most of the time. And we're dependent on this dog to help us with this. If your dog is like, I'm going to get shocked if I do that. I remember the last time that I did this and it went wrong. So now I'm not going to do that anymore. You miss those opportunities to build that communication, to build that relationship, and to settle in on that foundation of trust with your dog. If your dog doesn't trust you, if you've forced your dog into this position where they feel like, should I not? What do I? That causes anxiety, that causes reactivity. And now you have a dog that is unreliable as a service dog. This should be a partnership. You guys should be working together to build something for your health and safety in a trusting, loving relationship that your dog understands they're getting a reciprocated response of love and trust, and that you appreciate them. A little bit of appreciation goes a long way in any species. Everyone wants to be loved, everyone wants to be appreciated. And for the most part, everybody wants to be understood. So slowing down, listening, and taking that time, whether it takes 2 years, whether it takes 2.5 years, depending on where you're at with this dog, just give it that extra time, because that is the foundation of your relationship with your dog. And that is so important.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you even have to ask yourself, even if it's not you necessarily utilizing these traditionally compulsive tools, even if it's just you rushing the dog into that situation. I'm going to tell you right now, if I were the dog and you were making me do it all throughout my teenage years, and one day I I smelled that your heartbeat was off, but I was just like, but I could be sleeping through this right now, I probably would. Versus if you're my buddy and you've had me this entire time and I know what to do now because something's up with you, I'm going to jump into action, especially if I have a relationship with you. And if you don't think a dog also builds those types of relationships, trust me, they do. They will give you the middle finger and tell you to F off if they want to. And you know what? It'll be your own undoing.
That it will be your own undoing. I think a lot of times people just don't realize that the pressure and the stress and the way that we're training our dogs is our own undoing. We try to rush things, we look for quick fixes, all of this stuff, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You're going to have a dog that is afraid of you, that is afraid of its surroundings, and it's literally your own fault. We were talking about this before we hit the record button about people wanting these quick solutions for their dogs. Dogs are not programmable robots. We can't just say, here's your chip, now you're a service dog.
And having a dog is a relationship. It is a long-term cohabitation relationship. Yeah, I'm sorry. You got the dog. It lives for 15 years. It has a lifespan. It is a long-term commitment. So you can't go in and say, well, but I wanted perfection in the first 6 months. That's nice. You know what I'm going to say? That's nice. The dog probably did too, but he still seems to be sticking with you. So ride it out. The dog probably wanted it to be easier too.
Yeah.
He can't run away from you. Like, so
The dog is dependent on you for housing, food, all of the things. The dog cannot run off and do its own thing. You can run off and desert a dog if you're that kind of person, but not the best choice for
not
anybody.
one I would encourage.
No, definitely not one I would encourage either. I have just a few more questions before we wrap up here. For pet pros who are listening to this episode, how can they upskill towards service dog support ethically? Through mentorships, recommended literature, case consults, referral networks? What would you say to somebody that's saying, I would like to find people that I can refer clients to because they don't have any idea of what they're doing?
There's a lot of groups on the internet that are service dog centered. And I feel like a lot of communities are going to have connections to trainers, as well as I think there's a blacklist for trainers to avoid. So that's really important, because more than I can emphasize a really good trainer, I got to emphasize trainers to avoid. There's also, I believe it's Veronica. I don't remember their last name. They have a database of certified service dog coaches, because they have that service dog certification program, as well as I know that there is a new one that is building a base of referrals as well, which is the Anarchist Alliance Assistance Dog, I think, trainers. And that is one where they will even match you based upon identity. So they get really specific with it so that you're getting matched with a trainer that can work with you on an individual level. Those are my big initial recommendations, because it's kind of going through the weeds right now when it comes to locating service dog trainers that people can use as resources. There's tons of programs and organizations, but the wait lists are super long. So the bank of resources to be able to find service dog trainers is actually quite new. So those are the few organizations that I know of currently that are working on certified or vetted trainers that they can direct you to for people who need service animals.
That's incredible. There's a lot of people out there that they have no idea how to vet a trainer. They have no idea what the red flags are for service dog industry. They have no idea just purchasing a card off of the internet that says their dog is a service dog is not actually legitimate. And there are so many steps in between there. If a listener needed help today, where would you tell them to start?
If they needed help sourcing a service dog, my services are obviously always available. I do everything from helping people find and source a dog, whether you want to get a rescue, even though that process of vetting can be very tedious and stringent. We do offer those services. We offer a coaching program so that you're prepared for when you get your service dog, as well as a pledge program that includes a scholarship program along with it for people who are more disadvantaged, that is designed as an 18. And now we're actually creating also a 24-month program where you get a puppy that is ethically sourced, trained in my facility by me for 18 months up until the point where they're able to go home. And there's an entire very much catered integration phase that occurs as well within that program. So that can all be found. There's an application at thechaoscanine.com, which is my website. So if anybody was seeking to have any assistance right now with sourcing a service animal, getting prepared for being with one, or having one trained for them, that's an immediate resource that I can provide.
Phenomenal. And last but not least, what would you like to leave the listeners with?
I'd like to leave the listeners with dog training is a journey, not a destination. Being a dog guardian is about living life, and life is going to have its ups and downs. So it's not supposed to look perfect.
That is incredibly powerful and so very true. So remember, be kind, spread joy, don't rush the journey, and we'll see you guys next week on Straight Up Dog Talk. If you've been feeling like no one really understands what you're going through with your dog, it can feel really isolating and heavy carrying all that weight by yourself day after day. That's why I created a free community, a safe space where you can share the hard stuff, get support, and be surrounded by people who truly get it. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening to The Dog Who Asked for More. New episodes drop every Monday and Wednesday. I'll see you next time.